Hello, and we're here to talk about marriage and family life. I am Tommy Seaman.
And I'm Nicole Foster.
So, in an extended family, one would see multiple generations living together. You'd have the newly married couples with the bride or groom. You could have the grandparents and the children. And this was common in Africa and Asia.
In a nuclear family, parents would raise the children away from the extended family, so you'd only have two generations. And this was more common in Western and Central Europe because of the industrialization and urbanization during the 18th century.
And state of marriage. So people began to get married later, even up towards 27 years old. This was due to the need of being economically independent. So the family would have to be able to provide for themselves, have a steady job, and be able to support children. And the peasant daughter also had to pay a dowry for the land, and the son would have to have land.
So for work away from home, boys started leaving their families around the age of 14 to go to towns and cities where they would become apprentices for craftsmen for about 7 to 14 years, where they would really master craft, and sometimes they would be able to enter a guild. And other jobs they would do were drifting jobs, where they would work for farmers or laborers for a season and then move on to another job.
And work away from home for girls. So the most common job for them was being a servant in another household. Cleaning, shopping, and taking care of the children were some of the tasks. And employers would often pay the wages to the girls' parents, and they were often mistreated due to, and they would complain a lot. They could be physically abused, disrespected, or even sexually assaulted.
As for premarital sex in Europe, around 20 to 33% of the population had premarital sex, but less than 1 out of 20 children were illegitimate, and this was mostly based on community controls. Contraceptives were really only found in cities, and one of the main contraceptives was the sheath, which is basically a condom made out of sheepskin and intestines.
And community controls. So communities would often force couples to marry if they had premarital sex, and to cover up that the child was illegitimate. So a shotgun wedding was used to cover up the premarital sex. And then townspeople would often accumulate the couple to marry. So, for example, young men would throw rotten vegetables on the doorstep, or they would even force the offender to ride a donkey backwards through town while they would yell at his misdeeds.
As for childcare and nursing, women started breastfeeding for longer periods of time so that their likelihood of becoming pregnant again was lower. Breastfeeding actually made the baby's survival rate higher because of the immunity that they would get from the mother's breast milk. And upper class women often did not breastfeed their own children, but they would hire wet nurses.
So wet nurses were very widespread in the 18th century. Middle class and upper class women would hire them to breastfeed for them. And wet nurses, people often would believe that they passed on bad traits to the baby, and some people also believe that they were negligent and greedy, and people would claim that the wet nurses would kill the children if they did not survive infancy.
So, the Catholic Church actually founded foundling homes, which started in Italy, Spain, and France. And these were basically a place where mothers could drop their babies if they could not afford to take care of them. So in Europe, about 25,000 babies per year were admitted, but only 10% would live. About 50 to 90% of the babies would die. And nowadays, they call fondling homes legalized infanticide.
So infanticide, people would often kill their children if they cannot afford them, and churches were very against this, and they preached that killing babies was pagan practice, and it also became a crime that was punishable by death. And indirect methods did not disappear. So, for example, people would squish their babies and claim that they were drunk, and abortion was also strictly prohibited.
As for attitudes towards children, indifference towards children was found in all classes. Doctors urged parents not to become attached in case their children died. Women and healers and midwives were the only ones that would take care of children, and this became a form of abuse due to negligence. And Defoe said, "Save the rod and spoil the children."
So, changing of attitudes towards children. In 1762, J.J. Rousseau wrote Emily, which called for love and tenderness towards children. And these pro-child ideas became part of humanitarianism and optimism of the human potential.
So as children's love increased, as their education also increased. So Jesuits actually ran special colleges during the 16th century, and schools for elementary students from ages 7 to 12 began in the 17th century. And these taught literacy and religion mainly. They pushed reading as means of teaching effectively, and Prussia created the first universities and elementary schools, and soon Scotland, England, and France established schools based off of their main religion.
So, for literature, from the 17th century, only about 16% of males were literate, but by the 19th century, about 90% of males were literate. So this is widely attributed to the fact that all classes began to push for education, so not just the upper class, but middle and lower classes, and women's literacy also increased, but it was still lagged behind men.
The Bible was one of the favorite books around the world because it was being translated into vernacular at the time, but things such as chapbooks really appealed to the middle and lower class, and these included subjects of religion, humor, and fiction stories, which are now condensed into almanacs. But reading for the common people really relied on chapbooks, while the educated people focused on philosophy and science.
Thanks for watching!
Good luck on your AP exam!